My fiancé slept with my childhood friend while I planned our wedding, so I vanished. Silently, and what happened next shattered her life completely. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I thought I'd finally found the woman I'd marry. It wasn't just that Emily was beautiful, though she was, but there was something about the way she listened. The way she laughed, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the future. I had spent years grinding at my job, trying to carve out a life I could be proud of. And here she was, fitting perfectly into the little world I'd built. Financially stable, emotionally ready, and exhausted from the long hours of work that left little time for anything but progress. I finally felt like I could breathe. Emily was everything my parents loved. The kind of girl they'd nod approvingly at. The kind of woman who made me look like I'd done something right. Charming, attentive, seemingly perfect. I remember the first time I brought her home. My mom kept smiling like she couldn't believe her eyes, and my dad barely hid the grin behind his morning coffee. That instant validation made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I'd finally caught my break in life. Engagement planning was surreal. Picking out the ring together, sitting over spreadsheets and Pinterest boards, debating the guest list down to every last detail. I loved the little chaos of it, all the scent of fresh flowers at the shop. The faint click of heels on the marble floors, the warmth of Emily's hand in mine as we imagined the day. Weekend after weekend, we bounced ideas off each other, laughed over mismatched tablecloths, and envisioned a wedding that felt like us. And yet, there were tiny things I brushed off. Emily would sometimes step away during dinner to answer texts, her brow furrowing at her phone. Or she'd nod absent-mindedly while I spoke, distracted by calls I wasn't part of. But I trusted her. I told myself everyone gets busy. Everyone has moments as I lay in bed some nights staring at the ceiling. I felt proud, secure, like the universe had finally aligned. Everything felt right. I didn't know it yet, but that fragile sense of certainty was the calm before a storm I never saw coming. I thought the weeks leading up to the wedding would be chaotic, but joyful. And they were, at least on the surface. Every Saturday, I found myself running errands, booking caterers, tasting cakes, coordinating with photographers. The apartment was a mess of color swatches, ribbon samples, and stacks of spreadsheets. But I didn't mind. This was the life I wanted, the future I had imagined. Emily would sit beside me, sipping coffee, pointing out napkin folds or centerpieces she liked, her excitement contagious. I loved seeing her like that, engaged, happy, present. Work was draining, but planning a wedding felt like therapy. I'd spend late nights sending emails to florists, negotiating with venues, and still manage to make her laugh when she peeked over my shoulder to see the seating chart. It felt perfect, like we were a team taking on the world together. I thought I was showing her my love through my efforts. I believed she appreciated it. Then there was Jake's my childhood friend. He'd been a part of my life for as long as I could remember. When I mentioned him helping us with some wedding favors or offering to help with logistics, Emily smiled and nodded. He seemed harmless, like family. I never thought twice about it. He'd joke around, teasing me about my obsessive planning, and Emily would laugh. I thought that laugh was mine to cherish, not a warning sign. But small cracks were there. Emily would step away from conversations to take calls, sometimes disappearing for 20 minutes or more. She'd glance at her phone during dinners, fingers hovering over it like she was afraid someone might catch her. I saw it and didn't see it rationalized, I excused. I trusted evenings would end with us sprawled on the couch, reviewing to-do lists, dreaming about the honeymoon. I felt proud of how far we'd come, proud of the life we were building. I had no idea that behind those smiles, laughter, and meticulous plans, things were already starting to unravel. Something was quietly shifting in our perfect little world, and I was completely blind to it. It started small, almost invisible at first. Emily's laughter sometimes didn't quite reach her eyes. She'd zone out mid-conversation, staring at her phone as if it held secrets I wasn't supposed to see. And at first I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe I was just overworked. Maybe I was reading too much into harmless distractions. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It clung to me like a shadow, whispering that something wasn't right. Jake started showing up more often. To sometimes at our apartment, under the pretense of helping with wedding stuff. Other times, casually texting me about plans. I trusted him completely. He'd been there since childhood, the kind of friend you assume could never betray you. And Emily? She'd always greet him with that effortless smile that made me feel secure, until lately I noticed it lingering a little too long. Just a touch too warm. My chest would tighten for no reason I could name, and then I'd push it away. Dinner conversations began to feel different. Emily would dodge questions about her day, or I'd catch her muttering excuses about meetings or errands I hadn't scheduled. One night, she laughed a little too quickly when I joked about wedding stress. "Don't worry, babe. I've got everything under control," she said. But her eyes flicked toward her phone the second I looked away. I wanted to confront her, to ask what was going on, but something in me hesitated. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was denial. Even our weekend trips for cake tasting or floral shopping started to feel off. The subtle scent of her perfume would linger longer than usual when she returned from her phone calls. And I began noticing little details that didn't fit. Receipts for places I'd never heard of. Sudden changes in plans, vague explanations for missing time. Every instinct in my body screamed something was wrong, but I couldn't see it clearly yet. By the end of one long Friday, as I sat alone in our apartment surrounded by wedding swatches and spreadsheets, I realized the uneasy feeling in my chest had grown heavier. Something was brewing beneath the surface, something I wasn't ready to face. And in that moment, I had no idea how deeply it would cut. I wish I could say I saw it coming, but I didn't. I came home one evening, exhausted from a 14-hour day, and noticed Emily's laptop open on the kitchen counter. She'd stepped out for a quick errand door, so I thought. Something made me glance at the screen. My heart stopped. There they were, messages between Emily and Jake, words I never wanted to read. Words that confirmed every sickening fear my gut had been whispering for weeks. "I can't wait to see you tonight. Last night was amazing. He doesn't have to know." Shock hit me first, like a punch to the stomach. My hands trembled, vision blurring, and I had to sit down on the cold tile just to keep from collapsing. This was Emily, the woman I was going to marry. And Joktha, friend I had trusted since childhood. They were both lying to me, laughing behind my back while I spent hours planning a life I thought we shared. I felt every ounce of betrayal, humiliation, heartbreak at once. When Emily walked in, smiling and holding grocery bags, I couldn't speak. She noticed my silence, raised an eyebrow. "Hey, you okay?" she asked casually. I wanted to scream, to throw the bags across the room, to make her confess, but all I could do was nod and step into the living room. Pretending nothing was wrong. Later, I confronted Jake over the phone. Voice barely above a whisper. "What the hell is going on?" There was a pause. Then laughter, nervous, guilty, but still laughter. "It's complicated. You wouldn't understand," he said. I hung up, feeling the last thread of trust snap. I spent that night pacing the apartment, stomach twisting, mind racing. I kept thinking about every laugh Emily had given me, every late-night conversation, every shared plan tainted now by lies and betrayal. My life, the life I had carefully built, felt like it was crumbling beneath me. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I realized something cold and terrifying. This wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about control, deception, and the complete destruction of trust. And in that moment, I made a choice. I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to beg or fight. I would vanish, silently. But leaving wouldn't be the end. It would only be the beginning. I started pulling away slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. I didn't answer Emily's calls right away, skipped a few texts, and began saying I had late meetings or urgent projects. She frowned, asked if something was wrong, but I smiled, nodded, and said everything was fine. I couldn't let her see the storm raging inside me, not yet. Every part of me wanted to scream, to throw the truth in her face. But I realized something. If I confronted her, if I reacted openly, it would only feed her arrogance, give her the satisfaction of knowing she had hurt me. Jake seemed oblivious at first. Or maybe he was just confident that I'd never catch on. He still showed up at my apartment sometimes, under the guise of wedding errands, laughing, joking, trying to act normal. But I could feel him second-guessing himself, the small cracks of guilt beginning to form. Emily was more restless, distracted, panicking in subtle ways I didn't acknowledge at the time. It was almost satisfying seeing them squirm without giving them a target. I moved deliberately. Each day I became less reachable, more detached. I started documenting everything: the messages, the inconsistencies, the way they tried to cover their tracks. My anger simmered, precise and methodical, but there was also this hollow ache that made my chest feel impossibly heavy. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how someone I loved so completely could betray me so effortlessly. Evenings became quiet. I stopped attending pre-wedding meetings, avoided phone calls, and stayed out of social media entirely. Emily noticed, and the tension in the air grew thick. There were arguments with herself, whispers to friends, frustrated sighs that carried through thin apartment walls. But she didn't know I was watching, silently, carefully, planning every move in my mind. And then came the realization that chilled me. I wasn't just leaving. I was setting the stage. Vanishing wasn't surrender, it was preparation. I would step out of their lives, yes, but I would do it on my terms. And when the consequences hit, it wouldn't just hurt, it would shatter. Little did they know, the calm before the storm was already here. And when it broke, nothing would ever be the same. I left quietly, without a word, without a hint. No goodbyes, no explanations, just a packed bag, a few essentials, and the decision that I would disappear. The first few days were the hardest. The apartment felt empty, cold, and hollow, without the life we'd built together. I would sit in cafes for hours, staring out the window at strangers who had no idea what I carried with me: the betrayal, the anger, the heartbreak. Sleep was irregular, my mind looping over every lie, every stolen smile, every secret call. But slowly, the quiet started to feel like freedom. I could breathe without her presence looming over me. I found a small rental in another part of the city, just enough to be alone with my thoughts. I worked from home, kept a low profile, and began piecing myself back together brick by brick. Every mundane task felt like a victory: the act of choosing my own groceries, cooking my own meals, making my own decisions. There was a strange, almost meditative satisfaction in reclaiming control over the simplest aspects of life. And yet, I couldn't ignore the gnawing thought that burned under my skin. Emily and Jake, they were out there, spinning lies, manipulating friends and family, believing they'd gotten away with it. The thought made my stomach twist, and slowly, a plan began to form. This wasn't just about emotional recovery anymore. It was about silent justice. Then came the twist I hadn't anticipated, in the days after my disappearance. I discovered Emily had been manipulating more than just me. Small rumors, financial lies, favors she claimed to have handled, all part of a web I hadn't realized existed. She wasn't just a cheater, she was a schemer, and everyone around her was unknowingly part of the game. That realization lit a fire inside me. My heartbreak evolved into strategy. I would no longer be the one reacting. I would watch, wait, and when the time was right, I would ensure that the consequences hit her where it hurt most. But first, I had to remain invisible, blending into the shadows, letting them make mistakes they didn't even realize were coming. I watched it start to fall apart like a slow-motion car, crash terrifying, awful, oddly satisfying. At first, it was tiny things: a mutual friend asking Emily an awkward question at brunch, a cousin dropping by and leaving with a face like they'd just tasted bile. Word spread in circles I hadn't expected. Gossip is a hungry animal, and once it smells blood, it multiplies. I sat in my rented kitchen and read screenshots I'd kept, heart thudding, and felt a cold steadiness settle over me. This was working quietly, precisely. People started to notice inconsistencies in Emily's stories. "Didn't you say you booked the caterer?" One of her friends messaged in a group chat I'd never been part of before anonymously fed a tiny doubt. Another text: "Why did you say you handled the deposit when Mom remembers paying it?" Small seeds planted carefully began to grow into questions. Jake became the target of thinly veiled jokes. Friends stopped bringing him up in the same warm tone. I could picture them in my head, scrambling to patch holes with smaller, stupider lies. One night I read a voicemail I'd never intended to play out loud. It was Emily, frantic, calling a mutual friend. "Something's wrong. Someone's saying things. Did you hear anything?" "Please tell me you didn't hear anything." Her voice cracked on the last word. I remember whispering to myself, "You wanted certainty. Here it is." I wrestled with the satisfaction that swelled like acid and a quieter, softer, thin grief for what had been. They were unraveling, yes, but the unraveling also made the loss permanent. I told myself the leaks would stop before they became cruel. I told myself I wasn't a monster. Yet every time I imagined Emily's face when she realized how exposed she was, I felt a tiny, guilty thrill. Then the panic began to show. Late-night posts deleted, calls left unanswered, frantic texts to Jake that read like confessions. One message stood out, short and raw. "Who's doing this? Is someone watching us?" I froze, pulse a drumbeat. For the first time since I vanished, I felt seen. And that sight felt dangerous. The tension started to feel almost tangible, like electricity in the air. From a distance, I could see Emily unraveling piece by piece. Her carefully curated social media posts became erratic smiles that didn't reach her eyes. Captions that read defensive, almost pleading. She began arguing with Jake more frequently, their conversations laced with venom. Accusations spilling over into every minor disagreement. It was surreal watching the perfect image of their relationship crumble under the weight of secrets I knew and they had no idea I knew. I stayed invisible, but I wasn't idle. I made sure small truths found their way into the world, whispered in the right ears. Mutual friends began asking questions, noticing discrepancies that Emily and Jake could no longer cover up. "Wait, didn't you say you booked the hotel? I thought you handled the deposit." Tiny cracks multiplying into a chasm of doubt. The panic in Emily's messages grew with each passing day, her voice trembling when she called a friend privately, trying to figure out who could possibly know. I'd sit alone, listening to the quiet hum of my new apartment, and feel a strange mixture of satisfaction and lingering pain. Part of me wanted to gloat, and part of me grieved the betrayal that had brought me here. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, exhilarating, terrifying, and unavoidable. Then came the moment that made my stomach twist. A friend who had always been close to Emily sent me a screenshot of a text. Emily had hastily typed and deleted. "I don't know who's watching us. It's too late to fix this." Her panic was raw, unfiltered, and utterly consuming. I leaned back in my chair, breathing slowly, and let it sink in. The psychological pressure was real, and I had orchestrated it silently. Emily had no idea that the calm, controlled person she thought I was had been observing, planning, and waiting all along. And in that quiet moment, I realized something terrifyingly satisfying. The fall was just beginning, and she couldn't stop it. It hit me like a punch I hadn't seen coming. Emily's life, carefully constructed and polished, was collapsing faster than I could have imagined. Friends stopped answering her calls, colleagues began whispering, and even Jake's usual charm couldn't mask the tension. I watched the screenshots and messages pile up, each one like a hammer striking against the image she'd spent so long crafting. For the first time, I realized the betrayal had cost her more than I ever imagined: her pride, her relationships, her control, and yet I felt empty. Satisfaction was there, yes, but underneath it all, a hollow ache spread through me. I had wanted justice, but seeing the real human costs, the panic, the shame, the exposure made my chest tighten in ways I hadn't anticipated. I poured myself another drink, staring out the window at the city lights, thinking about the countless nights I'd spent trusting her, planning a future with her, only to have it stolen. My anger was sharp, almost tangible. But so was the grief. Then came the twist that shattered what little composure I had left. A mutual friend texted me anonymously, attaching a photo of Emily and Jake in a cafe, laughing, whispering, seemingly oblivious to the chaos surrounding them. Except, in her hand, she held a note, one of the small, personal reminders I'd written to myself when I first discovered the betrayal. She had found it, somehow, and it was proof she had been trying to track me. To predict my moves, to regain control, I sank lower than I'd ever sunk. It was rock bottom, seeing the web of lies, the manipulation, and the fact that even in their panic she was scheming. I felt small, powerless, like every plan I'd made could unravel in an instant. My apartment felt suffocating, the silence almost mocking me. But amidst the despair, a thought crystallized. The end wasn't here yet. I still had control over how the story finished, and the reckoning I had been building silently, meticulously, was far from over. I didn't rush back into their lives. I waited, patient, letting the tension build until it reached a point where Emily couldn't ignore it any longer. Then, slowly, I made my presence felt, not with anger, not with yelling, not with a dramatic reveal, but with calculated, subtle truths. Small messages found their way to her friends, reminders of inconsistencies she couldn't explain, hints of her lies that didn't trace back to me. The panic she had felt before was now a full-blown storm. One evening, I finally reached out, but carefully, measured in a way that gave her no room to manipulate. "I know everything," I typed, each word deliberate. The response came almost immediately, frantic, pleading, accusatory. "How? What are you talking about?" Her fingers must have hovered over the keyboard, shaking, because the text took several minutes to appear. I could almost hear her heartbeat through the words. Jake called next, his voice strained, almost desperate. "Please, you don't understand. It's not what you think." Didn't answer. I let the silence hang like a blade. They were unprepared, unarmed, and every instinct they had for manipulation failed them. It was a power shift they had never anticipated. I sat back and watched the fallout unfold. Emily's friends began questioning her, some openly, some subtly. Jake tried to cover, to charm, to explain, but no one believed him, not fully. The foundation they had built on, lies and deception, crumbled beneath them, leaving only fear and regret. Even as satisfaction surged through me, I remained calm. I didn't shout, I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. The chaos, the self-destruction, and the exposure were punishment enough. They had created their own downfall, and I had merely pulled the curtain to let them see it. And in that quiet, devastating moment, I realized the ultimate truth. Revenge didn't have to be loud or messy to be complete. The damage was done. The lesson was learned. And Emily, for the first time in her life, truly understood what it felt like to be powerless. The days after the silent confrontation felt surreal, almost dreamlike. I moved through my own life with a strange calm, watching the ripples of chaos I had set in motion reach their farthest edges. Emily and Jake were fractured friendships, strained or broken, family relationships tense and awkward, trust shattered. Every message, every social encounter, every awkward glance confirmed the truth. Their carefully constructed world had crumbled. I didn't gloat. That part of me was gone, replaced with something quieter but infinitely more satisfying: control. I was no longer the one betrayed, the one scrambling for explanations or trying to salvage trust. I was simply free to rebuild, free to breathe, free to live without fear, doubt, or betrayal hovering over me like a shadow. I took long walks in the evenings, relishing the quiet. The smell of fresh rain on pavement, the distant hum of the city, the way the streetlights glowed softly, it all felt like permission to exist fully in my own skin again. I allowed myself to remember what it felt like to smile without hesitation, to eat without stress, to sleep without dreams haunted by deception from time to time. I'd hear bits and pieces, mutual friends, casual encounters, whispers that hinted at the ongoing fallout. Emily's frantic attempts to explain herself, Jake's failed apologies, the awkward tension of their social circle when they crossed paths. I felt a mixture of relief and melancholy. Part of me mourned the life I had imagined, the love I had trusted, but that grief was tempered by clarity. And then, there was the quiet satisfaction, knowing I had reclaimed my story without stooping to their level. They had faced consequences that matched their betrayal, and I had remained above it all, unseen, yet undeniably present. I had vanished, but I had also ensured that what was owed justice, recognition, and balance was quietly delivered. I finally understood the weight of silence. Sometimes, letting the world watch itself unravel is the most powerful revenge of all. It's been months since I disappeared from their lives, and yet the echoes of that betrayal linger. Not like pain, but as a reminder of how far I've come. I'm no longer haunted by Emily's lies or Jake's charm. The hollow ache that followed the revelation has transformed into something else: strength, clarity, and a quiet confidence that no one can shake. I've rebuilt my life on my own terms, and for the first time in years, I feel entirely untouchable. I think about them sometimes. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a detached understanding. Emily, frantic, struggling to maintain a semblance of the control she once had. And Jake, losing the trust of everyone around him. They are facing the consequences they never imagined, and I don't have to lift a finger. The lesson has been delivered, not with violence, not with shouting, but with patience, precision, silence. I spend my days immersed in my work, my hobbies, and the simple pleasures I had abandoned. The city streets, the hum of cafes, the quiet mornings when the world is just waking up, they remind me that freedom tastes like air, unrestricted and pure. I've learned that revenge isn't about spectacle. It's about reclaiming your life, asserting your boundaries, and letting the natural consequences unfold. Sometimes I catch myself smiling at memories, the planning sessions, shared laughter, the dreams we had. Not with nostalgia, but with awareness. I recognize that those moments, once tainted, were also lessons in resilience. I am stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. And then there's the final, almost poetic realization: I walked away without destruction in my hands. Yet what remained behind shattered the illusion of control they thought they had. They are left to reckon with the mess they created, and I am left with clarity and peace. For the first time, I feel whole again, free, unshackled, and empowered. The storm has passed, and in its place, there is light. The ending isn't dramatic, it's mine.